I'm just going to bring you some breaking news now. We understand that two of the people who died in this incident are students at Nottingham University. That has been sent to us, a statement from the university saying that two of their students have died in this incident. So clearly tragic events, and we knew that there was a bit of a delay in getting information about exactly who the victims were, and probably was because the university was first being informed, and now that information coming out of the University of Nottingham that two of their students died in this incident. We had a statement earlier from the Nottingham University Students' Union, where they said that they were devastated and shocked by the tragic events, but it didn't allude to any of their fellow students being killed in this incident. But they said that we stand in solidarity with our students and the wider city, and our thoughts are with the families and friends of those harmed, alongside those directly and indirectly affected by the unfolding of these terrible events. In light of this, we have made the decision to cancel Grad Ball this evening. Attendees will be contacted in due course, but in the meantime we are continuing to work with the university and relevant authorities to understand the situation. That's a statement that came from the Nottingham University Students' Union, and we've had a statement direct from Nottingham University confirming that two of their students have died, and we have a statement that I've just been handed to by my colleagues here from the Uni of Nottingham, and they say it is with great sadness that we confirm the sudden and unexpected death of two of our students following a major incident in Nottingham city centre overnight. We are shocked and devastated by the news, and our thoughts are with those affected and their friends and their families. And there's a short thread actually on Twitter, and in the next tweet they say that we know this is likely to cause distress for staff and students in our community. Support is available through our support and wellbeing services for any of our community who may need it. So further confirmation then from the University of Nottingham that two of their students have died. Back to you.
Callum, thank you. Well, thank you, Callum. That update there, information on the identities of two of the people killed here overnight in a very much developing story, and one that is really dominating not just the headlines but also brought the centre of Nottingham to a standstill today. Let's bring in Danny Shaw, who's a crime, police and justice commentator and former correspondent at the BBC. Hi Danny, I just want to ask you first of all about the police statement that we had just over an hour or so ago. No doubt you've seen it, gone through it in some detail. What stood out for you?
I think what stood out for me from the statement was the quotation from the Chief Constable Kate Maynell, in which she said that the police needed to determine the motives for the attacks. So that I got a sense from that the police are really not sure what has motivated these attacks, and whether clearly they are linked, but whether the same motive is behind all of them, and whether indeed there was some incident in the first attack on Ilkeston Road, whether that was sort of separate from what followed later. So I think that really stood out for me. Also the fact that the police are still working with counter-terrorism officers. Counter-terrorism officers are working alongside them to establish the facts, to understand what's gone on here. Now, it can take some hours, in some cases days, before police declare that an incident is terrorism related. They're clearly keeping an open mind. They haven't ruled it out at this stage, and that's why counter-terrorism officers are involved. Sometimes it's very quickly apparent that it's not a terrorism-related incident, and sometimes it is. But clearly there are still some issues that the police are working through. And part of that will very clearly central to this is the background of the suspect who is currently in custody. Police will already, I am sure, have searched his home address, any other locations that he's visited, They will have seized computer devices, digital devices, his smartphone if they can get into it, looking at contacts he's had, who he's been associating with, what websites he's been visiting, and so on, to try and establish any motivation, any link to anyone else. They say no one else is involved, but that will be crucial to their inquiry to establish exactly the why. What happened is clearly in terms of that will be done in clearly in terms of evidence gathering on the scene, CCTV footage, and eyewitness accounts will help them establish what happened. But it's the why that I think is more of a puzzle at this stage.
Yeah, and as we wait for more information, give us a sense of how huge the police operation is here in Nottingham city centre, that such a large part of it's been closed off to the public, businesses as well shut down, numerous police cordons, the one behind me and at least at 3 other sites. And as I was walking through the city centre to try and get here as well because of all the road closures, I saw at least 2 armed police officers as well, a highly unusual sight in this city centre. So give us a sense of the scale of that and how difficult an operation it is for the police.
Well, there are multiple sites, and so, with any crime, you have a crime scene. In this case, there are at least 3, possibly more crime scenes that have to be sealed off. All the evidence has to be gathered. Police can't leave anything to chance. They have to be meticulous in their searches. They have to ensure that, no stone is left unturned, because this is a major investigation. There could be a criminal trial, and they have to gather all the evidence. They only get one chance to do it. They can't come back in 3 weeks later and say, well, let's have a look at that curb. Are there any tire marks on that curb, for example, or did we miss some forensic evidence, alongside that gutter? They can't do that in 2 weeks. They've got to do it now. That's why the roads have been sealed off. Police will also want to ensure that they get all the CCTV footage from shops and local council, other areas as well. That's absolutely vital in terms of establishing the what as part of this inquiry. I mean, for Nottinghamshire Police, it goes without saying, this is a massive investigation, probably the biggest they have done for many years. I was having a look at the figures. Last year, there were 13 killings investigated by Nottinghamshire Police, so that's murder, manslaughter, in particular 13, so about 1 a month. Here you have 3 in the space of just a few hours, with someone who's critically ill in hospital. So that gives you a sense of the scale of this for Nottinghamshire Police. And I've also seen that they've drafted in officers from other forces. That's not unusual. There is a system called mutual aid, where police forces can lend assistance in terms of specialist expertise or other officers when forces are faced with a huge inquiry like this.
And Danny, in this statement, they did reiterate that it is safe for people to come into the city centre and that they aren't looking for anyone else in connection with this inquiry at this stage. So what do you read into that?
Well, that they've got someone in custody. They don't believe at this stage that there's anyone else linked to this individual who poses a threat. So that's clearly a relief for the communities, people in Nottingham. And now their investigations are focusing on this suspect who's in custody. He will have been taken into custody in the early hours. I imagine police would have conducted what's called a safety interview, where they immediately find out whether this is linked to anything else, whether there are any other plots or plans that he's aware of, this individual. And then he will have had his DNA taken, his fingerprints taken. He would have been placed in a police cell, and I would have thought interviews will start sometime after that. Police have got quite a considerable amount of time to hold him, to question him. So I don't think that's a particular issue in this case, but establishing the motivation is key. And the fact that counter-terrorism officers are still involved some hours after the events suggests that still remains a possibility.